We just have so many options nowadays too. Like, you don't have to be an ultra marathon runner like me. I mean, there's like all sorts of fun stuff on. If you want to be a distance runner, there's 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons, marathons. There's the Spartan races. There's all sorts of different things you can do to get yourself out and start moving.
No doubt about it, right? Having a date on the calendar creates a why.
Spartans, listen up.
We need to sleep better. So how do you sleep better? Never thought about it before. And so I met Jack, I met Essentia. I pay attention to the mattress you sleep on because it's loaded with chemicals.
Recovery, cooling, and pressure relief, all in one mattress. Up to 60% more deep and REM sleep. Less inflammation, faster bounce back. No toxins, no EMFs, no BS.
My buddy Jack over at Essentia, he's kind enough to give us a code for the Spartan community. That's DECA, that's Tough Mudder, all of us. Use Spartan25, get a discount. Prioritize your sleep so you can sleep faster, you can do more burpees, you can train more, you can get healthier. When you sleep well, you live well.
Joe De Sena, CEO, founder of Spartan, host of Hardway Podcast. Got my buddy Zach Bitter on. This guy is a running lunatic, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles, podcast host, world record holder, absolute maniac. Welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me on, Joe. Looking forward to chatting.
What do you say to all those people that are listening or watching? They're like, you know what? I hate running, which, by the way, is probably the predominant answer you get, right? Certainly around the country. I hate running. What do you say to those people?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely gotten easier to convince people the last few years as running has gotten a little more popular. And I think groups that otherwise would have maybe avoided it have seen examples of people like that look like them, perform like them, do well in running races, and they've kind of got bitten by the bug a little bit. Usually what I tell people is there's kind of two things. One is be patient, because it's not uncommon at all that you're going to hate it for a few weeks or a couple of months even before you kind of start seeing some of the things your friends that are runners maybe are raving about. The other thing is just be mindful of just intensity, because a lot of times new runners will get into some like longer distance running and things like that. And it just becomes kind of a lot of efforts kind of on the higher end of the aerobic intensity spectrum, when they would really probably benefit from skewing a little more of their volume towards lower intensity stuff, at least in those early days, to kind of learn to really get used to the right intensity there and watch that evolve over time, versus trying to always force a faster paced run, which tends to be the parts that we all don't necessarily look forward to with running.
It is true. It's gonna sound silly. I don't mean to sound silly, but I've run a lot of long distance, not nearly as much as you, and definitely not as fast as you. And what I find is it's fairly easy if you go at an easy pace. Like, you just got to put one foot in front of the other, right? Like, it's almost like you're cheating and getting to pound your chest and say, look how awesome if you're not at your pace. Am I making any sense there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think one of the deterrents is people will watch others running and they'll see the paces and they get kind of maybe a little married to that's what I need to do. When in reality, it's all about just dialing in the right effort, especially in those early days. And if you're not afraid to go slow, or if you're really new to it, add walking breaks and things like that to make sure you're kind of laying that foundation and actually enjoying the activity versus wringing yourself dry every time, then I think that enjoyment aspect of running starts to kind of show up. And then put enough time with it, that pace comes down, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, you're running faster paces than you were early on. It doesn't feel quite as kind of slow moving as maybe it did in the beginning.
When did you notice that you were fast?
Yeah, my first sign was we did the Presidential Physical Fitness Challenge test in middle school, and it sort of gave me a sign that like, oh, there's different strengths and weaknesses within sport. It's not like, oh, if you're a great football player, you'll be a great basketball player, a great sprinter, a great long distance runner. There's variance there. So like, I got destroyed in the short 100-meter dash type stuff, and then like beat all my classmates in the 1 mile run. So I was like, oh, well, maybe there is something unique about that, or my skill set relative to these different disciplines that should kind of push me that direction. So that was maybe the first sign. Then, high school track and cross country, I was able to make the state meet in both of those by my senior year. So knowing that I was able to kind of compete with some of the faster kids in the state was a good sign that with some attention to it, I could be a decent runner.
And then you go off into the workforce and out of school, or did you tell us what you did at that point? Because there's a few people that just don't even go into the workforce. They They become endurance junkies.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I had no aspirations of becoming a professional runner at that point in time. My college experience was a lot of learning and kind of getting my feet under me with respect to kind of what my peers were doing from a training standpoint, really understanding that. And I was a good Division III runner, but I didn't have any like Olympic dreams or professional dreams that would have been realistic at that point. So, and that's pre-social media and things like that too. So there wasn't even a path forward to be like an influencer or something like that had I wanted to go that direction. But after college, I did learn one thing, which is that I wanted running to be like my number one hobby in life outside of working. So I went to school to be a teacher. So I got a job as a teacher in Wisconsin and did that for about 5 years as I started getting into ultra marathon running. And that's where I kind of started to really pick up momentum more on the kind of global scene with race results and things like that.
What was your first big 100-miler?
My first 100-miler was actually Western States. So I got in through, there's a series of races you can do where if you finish in the top two or in a few of them, it's the top three, you get an automatic invite into Western States. And I happened to be doing one of those that year as my primary race. I really didn't have any ambition to get into Western States, but once I ended up winning that race, and when I was offered that spot, everyone I knew that was more familiar with ultra running than I was told me I'd be an absolute idiot to pass on that. So in an effort to not be an idiot, I said, okay, well, I guess we're doing 100 miles now. And I hadn't run past 50 miles in a race at that point. So that was a pretty big learning experience coming from Wisconsin, going out to kind of the more trail mountain side of things out in California. And that was my first experience doing 100 miles, though. It wasn't until almost a year and a half later that I kind of found kind of flat, more runnable hundreds, and then broke the American record for the 100 miles and world record for 12 hours at the time back in 2013. And that sort of like gave me a little bit more of an indication of where maybe to focus my time and energies and passions around it in terms of like what kind of races I really wanted to peak for.
So let's go down that rabbit hole for a second and go back to what we were saying earlier, which was, one foot in front of the other. I was suggesting it's not that hard if you don't go at pace, but you're at pace in what you just described. You're I don't know if at that point in time or not that you're going to, break a world record or set a world record. That's not easy. Like you're at mile 65, 70, you're feeling it, right? Like you want to slow down. You want to make a pit stop. What are you telling yourself? Because maybe we can get some clues for all of us that are on the couch watching Netflix on how to push that, into that next gear.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say like there absolutely are going to be times in races like this where your mind is starting to kind of try to convince you to stop because it doesn't care about your ambitions going into it. It just says, hey, your body is tired and sore and it would be good to stop. So you start getting that message, and what it tries to do essentially is make you focus on that you have too much left to do and try to make what you're trying to do unsustainable so that you'll slow down and stop. And a lot of that times will come in the form of like, okay, I'm 60 miles into a 100-miler. 40 miles is a long way to go. And if you're feeling bad, how is it going to get better when you're continuing to do the thing that got you into that spot in the first place? That's where your mind is going to try to push you. So when you get to those spots, I think what you want to do is you want to start to minimize what it's trying to make look big. So if that's 40 miles left in the race, I kind of want to do two different things. One is zoom out and look at the grand scheme of things where I probably spent 4, maybe 6 months preparing for that race. So the number of hours and miles I ran just to get to the start line is like 99% of the project. So if I'm at mile 60 of a 100-mile, I'm actually so close to finishing, it's almost embarrassing to think about giving up at that point. So that's kind of a way to maybe try to make something that would otherwise feel big, feel small. And then you also want to make sure that you're giving yourself manageable goals within that too. So then it's like picking something small to try to get to. So maybe it's like, all right, I'm going to do 2 more miles and that's when I'm going to get this bottle or this piece of nutrition or something like that. And just hyper focus on that versus letting your mind kind of drift towards what you have left. So zooming out, making what you got left look small, relatively speaking. Zooming in to focus on a goal that you can wrap your head around in the moment. Those two things work really well in terms of kind of getting through some of those roadblocks.
And in the example you're given, this is great. In the example you're given, in those 40 miles that remain, is that happening 20 times every 2 miles?
Yeah, it definitely gets more frequent. So like early on, it's like you get like, it feels great. You feel like this is awesome. I'm just breezing through this thing. The miles are clipping off. Usually I find like once you get to the spot where you hit where your longest long run was in the training cycle, you start kind of getting a little bit of a doubt because now you're kind of pushing into like territory you just don't hit that often. Oftentimes it was a prior race that you got to there, so you're a little more further removed from that. And then you kind of have to start kind of chunking things at that point to wrap your head around it. But I wouldn't say it's necessarily a consistent linear like experience. You definitely have phases within that where there might be like a 5 mile chunk where you just feel really good, like better than you had all day, and it could happen at 73 miles or something like that. And then that could go away. And then the next 5 miles, you find that you're just fighting mental battles like continuously, like just popping up left, right, and center. So I think it's partly just knowing that those trends are there and they're somewhat unpredictable is helpful to both kind of lean into the spots when you feel good and just say, okay, let's just enjoy this while it lasts. And then when you get those hard spots, know like, okay, this is just going to be a spot where I got to invest a little more mental energy, spend a little more of my mental bandwidth getting through it. And then I'll get back to one of those good experiences if I continue to push through that.
You know what I learned years ago? I started well before you. I'm old and on my way out, I guess. I learned from some pros that we can't rest. We can't rest in the in the pit stops. And I said, why? And they said, because those areas are too comfortable. If we want to rest, we've got to rest like in a really shitty location before or after a pit stop. And I thought that was genius, right? You got to set yourself up for success here.
Yeah, that's perfect. I would say like when I'm doing these short loop controlled type events where they're just built for running fast, I try to minimize any stopping time just if I need to use the bathroom. That way my rest point is in a porta potty, so not a desirable spot to be. And then it's like, yeah, you sort of have this opportunity, I think, where, okay, this is something I have to take care of. It's not something that's sustainable to not stop. You're going to just like, if you're running for 12 hours, there's going to be a point where you need to use the bathroom and kind of build that into the race strategy. So I do find like maybe that's 2 or 3 times during the race. I use those as a spot where, okay, I had this opportunity to stop for maybe a minute and take a mental break because there is a fatigue that builds up over time when you're just continuously focused without any break. So if you kind of have an opportunity where you have to stop, making sure you kind of turn your brain down a little bit during that and just say, okay, reset, refocus. And then when you get back out and start going again, it almost feels to some degree like you've reset your mind a little bit and you can tolerate a little bit more of the back and forth that your brain is going to feed you throughout the course of the rest of the race.
Music, no music?
Yeah, I'll do music for sure. I'm assuming there's some races that don't allow it, in which case then you gotta be all in your mind, I guess. But I'll dose it in. I try not to use it too aggressively, especially early on, because it is something where I find it kind of becomes less impactful if you overdo it. Sort of like caffeine. You have like a certain amount that you can use to leverage the benefit from it, but going beyond that isn't necessarily going to do you any favors.
I agree. You a morning runner? You late night? What's your body clock look like?
Yeah, I'm usually going to do my primary workout in the morning, and that's where I tend to feel like I perform better and can get the target workout in. When I get into like big training cycles and phases of phases of the training cycle, then I'll be doing some 2-a-day stuff where I might go back out in the afternoon for a run or do some strength work in the afternoon. So I definitely kind of touch both areas, but preference-wise, morning is where it's at for me.
And then it's done, right? You get it done in the morning. For anybody listening, if you put it off and you probably skip it. Let's talk nutrition. What do you find works?
Yeah, so I spent 14 years doing like a low carbohydrate approach, and I've done all my 100 miles to date on that approach. I have found ways to make it work well for me, especially at these longer distance races. I think there's some uniqueness with 100-mile racing because the intensity is low enough where I think the window of options is maybe a little wider. And then you're getting into like smaller percentage points in terms of positives or negatives there. And then at the individual level, you maybe need to tease that out. I'm actually trying a high carb approach right now for the first time for these 100-mile races I'm doing this year, just to kind of see what potential there is there for me since I haven't done a 100-mile yet with it. So by the end of this year, hopefully I'll have a full picture of just kind of like what the the benefits and trade-offs are for either of them.
Could be a fun book, right? Avocado or Snickers. But that's interesting. Low carb. So walk us through a low carb diet for you.
Yeah, so the way I usually would look at it is I usually refrain from what people would consider maybe a strict ketogenic diet outside of maybe like some off-season phases. Once I kind of get into the structured training of like base building, kind of interval work, and then ultra long run development, things like that, I'd bring back some carbohydrates sort of around some of those training sessions. But generally, it would be like in the neighborhood of like at the lowest points, maybe 10% of my input coming from carbohydrate. And then at the highest points on maybe some like short interval days or higher intensity workouts and things like that, maybe up to 30%. So it always kind of remained in that like second tier macronutrient compared to the fat inputs I'd be getting. But I tried to kind of match the demands of the work I was doing with a little bit more, a little bit less carbohydrate, depending on how the intensity played out.
Walk us through your favorite meal.
On low carb, it was probably either steak or eggs. Either of those would definitely be something that I would definitely crave or be looking forward to after a long run or something like that.
Avocado?
Definitely some avocado. Yeah, I'll have some avocado. Olive oil was another big input I would use a lot for low carb stuff. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
My oldest son was 8. I took him out to do a 50K. The organizer was kind enough to let us go out and do it. And it was a walk run. It was just survival at best. And I got him to the finish line, and he was starving. We got some food, and I was excited to give him the medal. And they said, "Oh, we don't do medals at this race. We give out chairs." And I had to go to my 8-year-old son who just got through a 50K and say, "Hey, you got a chair." He said to the organizer, he goes, "Hey, could I get 2 more chairs, one for my brother, one for my sister?" I think he was so delirious. By the way, he had bacon in his pocket because they were doing bacon on that run. So it is a unique personality that's out there and around these events for sure. Only you would understand.
Yeah, no, you see everything for sure. From the food choices to the approaches to the race, everything. Yeah.
All right, 3. You gave us some great tips in the beginning, but give us 3 tips just to live an optimized life for the audience. Again, you look at obesity rates, you look at diabetes, et cetera. Folks are not necessarily living optimal lives. So, what 3 things would you say everybody could do?
One I would say is like add a structure, but add a structure in place that is movable enough so you can start where you're at versus trying to get too aggressive. I think sometimes people they'll get gung-ho about just like, all right, I need to get into shape, I need to do better, and they bite off a huge chunk that's just too much for what they're ready for. So add the scaffolding into your life where you have the opportunities available to focus on fitness, and then start layering in from where you're at from there. That's a big one for me. The other one would be like just how do you reflect on that stuff? Because I think a lot of times people miss opportunities for growth and consistency when they just go out and kind of push through a workout and think nothing of it other than just like, okay, I did the workout, good, I'm done. And then they get into this cycle of rinse and repeat where there's this never ending cycle there versus looking for things like progress monitoring of certain workouts or taking an inventory on like, how do I feel on a day where I get a workout in the morning throughout the rest of my day? Where's the productivity there where you can see these additional value points from that training session versus just checking that box? And then also find your why with fitness too, because we just have so many options nowadays too. Like you don't have to be an ultra marathon runner like me. I mean, there's like all sorts of fun stuff on, if you want to be a distance runner, there's 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons, marathons. There's the Spartan races. There's all sorts of different things you can do to get yourself out and start moving. So like keep an open mind as to like, what is it you actually want to be doing? What is your goals within that? And give yourself a good, strong why that you can go back to when you get kind of a little bit of a weak mind around whether you want to do your training session or not.
Yeah, no doubt about it, right? Having a date on the calendar creates a why. Scaffolding, I also thought when you see like having a support system or people that are into it and going to hold you accountable. I've had Navy SEALs on that have said, we worked hard all day. I'm sitting down, I'm grabbing a beer, I'm about to relax, and out the window I see a SEAL across the street going for a 3rd run. And so then I get up and so definitely have friends around. And then I like what you said around, making sure you you reflect on what you've done, because you could let it all slip by and not realize how much progress you're making.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just something where you're just keep an open mind about always evolving within that too. And I think one of the benefits we have with running getting more popular now too is there's just so many more like run clubs and communities around it too, where you can go out and, you go for a run, say you're running 60 minutes with the group, and you're taking away so much more than just that workout when you do that, when you get that, especially nowadays when we have so much online, and it can be easy to get sucked into thinking, okay, I'm socializing, I'm filling that side of my needs. It's just different. So like get out into the communities, meet other runners, or if you're in a different sport, then, meet people within that one and take advantage of that community side of things for sure.
I love it. You're awesome. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.